a crimson gown, a crystal glass raised too many times. The most powerful woman in Chicago swaying at midnight, abandoned by everyone who claimed loyalty. Veronica Sterling built an empire on control until the night she lost it. One man saw her falling. He didn't pull out his phone. He didn't laugh with the others. Caleb Hayes, a single father who knew what reckless nights could cost, made a choice that would shatter both their carefully built walls. This is what happened when kindness collided with power. Drop a comment with your city and hit subscribe. Let's see how far this story travels. The ballroom glittered like a carefully constructed illusion. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across marble floors, each reflection designed to remind Chicago's elite exactly where they stood in the hierarchy. At the center of it all, wrapped in crimson silk that moved like liquid fire, stood Veronica Sterling. She didn't walk through the gala. She commanded it. Every conversation paused when she passed. Men adjusted their ties with nervous precision. Women glanced down at their own gowns, suddenly aware of how much they cost versus how much hers implied. The difference wasn't just fabric and cut. It was power, worn so casually it looked effortless. Veronica had built Sterling Industries from a failing tech firm into a billion-dollar empire in less than a decade. The business press called her ruthless. Her competitors called her unstoppable. Her employees called her Ms. Sterling and made sure to have answers ready before she asked questions. Tonight's charity gala was less about charity and more about being seen. The guest list read like a who's who of Chicago power brokers, venture capitalists, politicians, media moguls, all of them circling each other with champagne flutes and calculated smiles. For most of them, this event was survival dressed up as celebration. One wrong word to Veronica Sterling could end a partnership. One well-timed compliment might open doors that had been locked for years. She understood this game better than anyone. She'd written half the rules herself. Her dress caught every eye, deliberate in its boldness. The scarlet fabric hugged her frame before flowing outward, a controlled drama that matched everything about her public persona. When she laughed, the room echoed it back. When she lifted her glass, others followed without thinking. She was the sun around which this particular universe orbited, and everyone present understood their role. But empires, no matter how carefully constructed, have foundations, and Veronica's had cracks she'd spent years learning to hide. The champagne came in waves. Crystal flutes appeared in her hand as if by magic, offered by servers who knew better than to let her glass stay empty. At first, she sipped with the same controlled precision she brought to board meetings. Each conversation was a transaction. Each smile had a purpose. The alcohol was simply part of the performance, social lubricant for deals that would be finalized over email on Monday morning. But somewhere between the third and fourth glass, or maybe it was the fifth, the performance began to blur at the edges. Her laugh grew sharper, cutting through conversations like a knife. Her movements, usually choreographed to perfection, started to lag just slightly behind her intentions. When she raised her glass too quickly, champagne splashed onto her wrist. She wiped it away with a gesture that almost looked casual, but Veronica Sterling didn't do casual. She did calculated. The crowd noticed. Of course they noticed. These were people trained to read power dynamics the way sailors read weather patterns. They saw the slight wobble in her step, the way her eyes took a moment too long to focus when someone spoke to her name. They saw it, cataloged it, and immediately looked away. Because acknowledging Veronica Sterling's weakness was like acknowledging a crack in the foundation of reality itself. Safer to pretend the center was holding. Safer to turn to the person next to you and laugh about something meaningless, while the most powerful woman in the room swayed almost imperceptibly near the champagne table. At the far edge of the ballroom, pressed against a marble column where the light softened into shadow, stood Caleb Hayes. His suit was pressed but plain, the kind bought off the rack at a department store, not tailored to impossible perfection. His shoes were polished, but the leather showed wear at the heels. In a room full of people performing wealth, Caleb looked exactly like what he was. A mid-level analyst who'd gotten the invitation because attendance was mandatory for anyone hoping to keep their position at Sterling Industries. In his hand, he held a glass of water. It was room temperature now, the ice long melted. He'd been nursing it for 2 hours while everyone around him worked through their third or fourth round of champagne. People had noticed. A few had made jokes. "Lighten up, Hayes, it's a party." One particularly drunk VP had clapped him on the shoulder and asked if he was training for something. Caleb had just smiled politely and said he preferred to keep a clear head. The truth was more complicated than that, woven through with grief and responsibility, and a promise he'd made to himself in the darkest moment of his life. But that wasn't the kind of thing you explained at a corporate gala. He checked his watch, 11:47 p.m. Back home, Lily would be asleep by now, her small chest rising and falling beneath the quilt his late wife had sewn. Mrs. Chen from next door was watching her, the same reliable presence she'd been for the past 3 years. Lily trusted her completely, which was the only reason Caleb had agreed to come tonight. But every minute spent in this glittering ballroom felt like time stolen from where he actually belonged. His gaze drifted back to Veronica Sterling, almost against his will. She was holding court near the orchestra, surrounded by a half-circle of executives who laughed at her jokes with just a beat too much enthusiasm. Her crimson dress caught the chandelier light, making her look like a flame that might consume everything around it. Except Caleb could see what the others were pretending not to notice. The way her balance shifted subtly, weight transferring from one foot to the other as if the marble floor had developed a tilt. The way her words came just slightly slower, each syllable carefully pronounced to hide the slur threatening at the edges. He knew those signs. He'd lived with their consequences. The memory hit him without warning, as it always did. Emily laughing in their tiny kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. "I'm heading home now. Traffic's light. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The sound of rain against their apartment windows, the gentle hum of the refrigerator, Lily making soft sleeping sounds from the nursery, and then a stranger's voice replacing Emily's. "Sir, there's been an accident." 3 years since that night. 3 years since a drunk driver had crossed the center line on Lakeshore Drive and turned Caleb's world into before and after. 3 years since he'd stood in the rain at a cemetery, holding a 1-year-old who didn't understand why mommy wasn't coming home. He hadn't touched alcohol since. Not at weddings, not at work events, not alone in the dark when the grief felt like it might swallow him whole. He'd made a promise to Emily's memory and to Lily's future. He would never be the reason someone else lost what he'd lost. He would show up sober, steady, whole, every single day. The orchestra shifted into something slower, strings weaving through the air like silk ribbons. Around Caleb, couples moved toward the dance floor. He stayed where he was, anchored to the column, watching as Veronica Sterling's empire of control continued its almost imperceptible fracture. "You really don't drink, do you?" The voice came from his left. Marcus Webb, another analyst from the 4th floor, holding 2 champagne flutes. He offered one to Caleb with a knowing smile. "Not my thing," Caleb replied, keeping his tone light. Marcus shrugged, already losing interest. "Suit yourself. Though I gotta say, watching Sterling get progressively more relaxed, that's entertainment worth a drink." He nodded toward where Veronica stood, then lowered his voice conspiratorially. "Never seen her like this. Someone should probably get her a car before she does something she regrets." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Maybe someone should." "Not it," Marcus laughed, already turning away. "Last thing I need is to be the guy who implies the CEO can't handle her champagne. Career suicide, man." He disappeared into the crowd, leaving Caleb alone with his water and his growing unease. The thing was, Marcus wasn't wrong. In the ruthless calculation that governed Sterling Industries, being the person to acknowledge Veronica's vulnerability would be remembered, and not favorably. Even if the gesture came from genuine concern, it would be interpreted as presumption. Who was Caleb Hayes, mid-level analyst with worn shoes and a department store suit, to suggest that Veronica Sterling needed help? But Caleb had learned something in the 3 years since Emily's death. The court of public opinion mattered a lot less than living with yourself afterward. Midnight came with the delicate chime of the orchestra pausing between sets. The crowd began to thin as people made their exits. Strategic departures timed to avoid being the first to leave, but not the last. Assistants materialized with coats. Valets were summoned. The energy that had sustained the room for hours began to evaporate like champagne bubbles. Caleb watched as Veronica's usual entourage melted away. Her personal assistant, who'd been hovering nearby all night, got pulled into a conversation near the exit. Her driver, who typically waited in the lobby for her signal, was nowhere to be seen. Even the executives who'd been clustering around her moments before had found pressing reasons to be elsewhere. She stood near the grand entrance, one hand resting against the marble doorframe. From a distance, it might have looked casual, elegant even. Up close, Caleb could see the truth. She was using it for balance. Her glass was empty. The orchestra had gone silent. The ballroom that had revolved around her now seemed vast and vacant, the chandeliers still blazing, but the magic leached out of the light. Veronica Sterling, the woman who commanded billion-dollar board meetings without notes, who'd once made a senator apologize on live television, stood alone at the edge of her own gala, looking smaller than Caleb had ever seen her. He set down his water glass on a passing server's tray. Every logical part of his brain warned him to walk away. This wasn't his problem. Veronica Sterling had resources, had people whose entire jobs revolved around managing situations exactly like this. If he approached her now, it would be remembered, whispered about, analyzed for hidden motives. But walking away would also be remembered, not by anyone else, by him. In the quiet moments at 3 a.m. when Lily was asleep and he was alone with his thoughts, he'd remember that he'd seen someone who needed help and chosen the safer path. Emily wouldn't have walked away. She'd been the kind of person who stopped for strangers with flat tires, who brought groceries to elderly neighbors, who believed that kindness wasn't a transaction but a responsibility. Caleb took a breath and started walking. His footsteps echoed against the marble, too loud in the emptying ballroom. A few remaining guests glanced his way, then quickly found somewhere else to look. He could feel their silent judgment, their calculation. What is Hayes doing? He didn't care. Veronica turned as he approached, her eyes taking a moment to focus. Recognition flickered across her face, blurred by champagne, but still sharp enough to slice. "Hayes," she said, her voice carefully controlled but slightly off-tempo, like a familiar song played just a beat too slow. She straightened, trying to reclaim the posture of command. "Leaving already?" "No, ma'am," Caleb said quietly, respectfully. "I was actually wondering if you needed a ride home." The words hung between them for a long moment. Around them, the last few guests pretended not to listen while straining to hear every syllable. Veronica's expression cycled through surprise, suspicion, and something that might have been gratitude before settling on defensive pride. "I have a driver," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the lobby. "And a car. Several cars, actually." "I'm sure you do," Caleb replied, keeping his voice low, private. "But I don't see any of them here right now. And it's late, and—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "It would make me feel better to know you got home safely." "Would it?" It wasn't quite a question. Her gaze sharpened despite the champagne, studying him with the intensity that made executives practice their presentations in mirrors. "And why exactly do you care how I get home, Hayes?" This was the moment, the point where he could deflect, make it about professional obligation or company loyalty. The safer answer, the smarter answer. Instead, Caleb told her the truth. "Because I know what happens when people don't make it home safely," he said quietly. "And I wouldn't wish that on anyone." Something in Veronica's expression shifted. Not softening exactly, but pausing, as if the armor she'd built so carefully had developed a crack just wide enough to let that single truth through. She looked away, toward the empty ballroom, toward the life she'd built on being untouchable and in control. Then she looked back at Caleb, really looked at him, maybe for the first time despite the 2 years he'd worked at Sterling Industries. "Your car better not smell like takeout," she said finally, and Caleb understood it for what it was, permission. He nodded once, professional and calm, though his heart was hammering. "It's clean, I promise." The walk to the parking garage felt surreal. Veronica moved carefully, her heels clicking against the marble with less certainty than usual. Caleb stayed close enough to help if she stumbled, but far enough to preserve her dignity. When they passed the lobby, he saw the night concierge's eyes widen in recognition before professionalism smoothed his features back to neutral. Tomorrow, this would be gossip. Tomorrow, there would be speculation and whispers and probably a conversation with HR about appropriate boundaries. But tomorrow was tomorrow. Tonight, Caleb just focused on getting one person home safely. His car, a 7-year-old sedan with a dent in the passenger door from a grocery store parking lot incident, sat in the section reserved for regular employees. It looked absurdly ordinary next to the Teslas and BMWs parked nearby. Caleb unlocked the passenger door and held it open. Veronica paused for just a moment, and he could see her taking in the cloth seats, the air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror, the booster seat in the back that he'd forgotten to remove. "Your daughter?" she asked, nodding toward the back seat. "Yes, ma'am. Lily. She's 3. Veronica slid into the passenger seat with as much grace as champagne and a tight dress would allow. Caleb closed the door gently and walked around to the driver's side, giving himself a moment to process what was happening. He was about to drive his CEO home, the woman whose decisions affected thousands of lives, whose quarterly earnings calls moved markets, was sitting in his car with the check engine light that wouldn't turn off, and the radio stuck on the classic rock station Lily insisted made the traffic go faster. He got in, started the engine, and the radio immediately blasted to life. Tom Petty's Freefallin' at a volume meant to entertain a 3-year-old. Caleb lunged for the dial, turning it down so fast he nearly snapped the knob off. "Sorry," he muttered, feeling his face heat. "Lily likes it loud." To his absolute shock, Veronica laughed. Not the controlled, calculated sound from the gala, but something genuine that seemed to surprise even her. "Seatbelt," Caleb reminded gently, and she complied without argument. They pulled out of the garage and into Chicago's late-night streets. The city stretched around them, neon signs reflecting off wet pavement from an earlier rain, taillights streaming ahead in red rivers, the distant glow of Navy Pier like a forgotten constellation. For the first few minutes, neither of them spoke. The silence was strange but not uncomfortable, filled with the hum of the engine and the occasional whoosh of passing traffic. Caleb kept his eyes on the road, hyper-aware of every turn, every stop sign, every choice that kept them moving safely through the night. Then, so quietly he almost didn't hear it over the engine, Veronica spoke. "Everyone thinks success is glamorous." Caleb glanced over. She was staring out the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass, the city lights painting her face in alternating shadow and gold. "They see the power," she continued, her words careful but less guarded than he'd ever heard. "The decisions, the deals, She gestured vaguely. "The dress. They don't see the nights when you realize you've spent 10 hours commanding a room full of people and can't remember the last time someone just talked to you. Really talked." Caleb let the words settle before responding. "That sounds lonely." "It is." She turned from the window to look at him. "But that's the price, right? You want to build something that matters. You sacrifice the things that don't fit. Friends, relationships, normal Friday nights where nobody's calculating the angle." Another bitter laugh. "Look at me. Most powerful woman in Chicago, and I'm getting driven home by an employee because everyone else disappeared the moment I wasn't perfect anymore." There was pain in those words, sharp and honest enough to cut through all the champagne. "I don't think that's the price you have to pay," Caleb said carefully. "I think that's the price people convince themselves they have to pay, so they don't have to admit they're scared." Veronica's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in something like interest. "Scared of what?" "Of being seen as human instead of untouchable." The words hung there while they waited at a red light. Caleb could feel her studying him, reassessing whatever category she'd filed him under. "You're braver than you look, Hayes," she said finally. "Most people don't tell me the truth. They tell me what they think I want to hear." "I'm not most people," Caleb replied, surprising himself with his own directness. Maybe it was the late hour. Maybe it was the fact that this whole situation was already so far outside normal that honesty seemed like the only reasonable choice. "I don't have the energy to calculate angles anymore. Life's too short for that." "Is it?" There was challenge in her voice, but also genuine curiosity. "What made you so wise?" Caleb's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The memories rose like a tide he couldn't hold back. Emily's laugh, the sound of rain, the phone call that split his life into before and after. "I lost my wife 3 years ago," he said quietly. The words came easier than expected, maybe because the darkness of the car felt safer than daylight confessions. "Drunk driver, head-on collision on Lakeshore Drive. She was coming home from dinner with friends. 20 minutes from our apartment. 20 minutes from—" His voice caught. He swallowed hard, forced himself to continue. "From me and our daughter. Lily was only 1. She doesn't remember her mom, which is maybe a mercy or maybe the cruelest part. I haven't decided yet. The silence that followed was different now, heavier, more honest. I'm sorry, Veronica said, and her voice had lost all its practiced edges. I don't have words for how sorry I am. Thank you. Caleb checked his mirrors, changed lanes, gave himself something to focus on besides the tightness in his chest. It's why I don't drink. People think I'm being judgmental or self-righteous, but it's not that. I can't be the reason someone else loses what I lost, and I can't risk not being there for Lily. She's lost enough. He felt exposed saying it, like he'd opened a door he usually kept locked. But something about this moment, the late hour, the strange intimacy of a shared car in the dark, the fact that Veronica was actually listening instead of calculating, made the honesty feel necessary. Your daughter's lucky, Veronica said, to have someone who shows up that completely. I'm the lucky one, Caleb corrected gently. She saved me, gave me a reason to keep going when everything else felt impossible. They drove in silence for a while after that. The city rolled past, neighborhoods shifting from commercial to residential, from neon to quiet darkness punctuated by streetlights. Caleb navigated by GPS to an address in Gold Coast that probably cost more per month than he made in a year. When they pulled up to her building, all glass and steel and a doorman who looked alarmed to see his resident arriving in a dented sedan, Caleb put the car in park but didn't turn off the engine. Thank you, Veronica said. She hadn't moved to get out yet. For the ride, for the honesty, for... She paused, choosing her words carefully despite the champagne still blurring her edges. For treating me like a person instead of a position. You are a person, Caleb said simply. A person who's had too much champagne and needs to get some sleep. Come on, let me walk you up. She looked like she might argue, pride flaring briefly in her eyes, but then she just nodded. The lobby was all marble and gold accents, the kind of place where even the air felt expensive. The doorman recovered his composure quickly, greeting Veronica with professional warmth, while his eyes flickered with barely concealed curiosity about her companion. The elevator ride to the penthouse was quiet, except for the soft classical music piping through hidden speakers. Veronica leaned against the wall, her crimson dress now looking more like a costume she was tired of wearing. When the doors opened directly into her apartment, Caleb's breath caught for just a moment. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Chicago skyline like a painting made of light. The furniture was all clean lines and expensive fabrics, beautiful in the way museum pieces are beautiful, meant to be admired rather than lived in. It was stunning. It was perfect. It was lonely. Water, Caleb said, already moving toward the kitchen. He found a glass, actual crystal, probably worth more than his monthly grocery budget, and filled it from the filter tap. He brought it back to where Veronica had collapsed onto a white couch that looked like it had never been sat on before. Drink this, he said, setting it on the glass coffee table. The whole thing. You'll thank me tomorrow when your head isn't splitting. She looked up at him, and for a moment he saw past all the armor, past the CEO and the empire and the reputation. He saw someone who'd built walls so high she'd forgotten what it felt like when someone tried to climb them without an agenda. Why are you helping me? She asked. You could have left me at the gala, could have laughed about this with the other employees on Monday, could have... But I didn't, Caleb interrupted gently. Because I know what it feels like when nobody shows up, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. The words echoed what he'd said earlier at the gala, but they landed differently now, in the quiet of her apartment, with her defenses finally down. Veronica's eyes glistened, though whether from champagne or emotion, Caleb couldn't tell. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the moment and the 1,000 ways it could be misconstrued. You should sleep, drink the water, and maybe take Monday easy if you can. Hayes, she called as he moved toward the door. He turned back. What you said in the car about being scared. She paused, gathering words. You were right, I am scared. Of being seen as weak, of people using my humanity against me, of... Her voice dropped to almost nothing. Of being alone. Caleb felt something crack open in his chest. Not romantic, he barely knew this woman beyond quarterly reports and company memos, but human. The recognition of shared pain. You don't have to be, he he said quietly. Alone, I mean. But you do have to let people in. The real you, not just the untouchable version. She smiled, sad but genuine. When did you get so wise? Round the same time I learned that life's too short to waste on pretending. He let himself out, closing the door softly behind him. The elevator ride down felt different, lighter somehow, despite the strangeness of what had just happened. When he got back to his car, he sat for a moment before starting the engine, processing the night. Tomorrow, there would be consequences. Tomorrow, people would ask questions he didn't have polished answers for. But tonight, he'd done the right thing. He'd shown up when someone needed help. He'd honored Emily's memory by being the kind of person she'd always believed he could be. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. Lily's still sleeping soundly. Take your time. Caleb smiled, put the car in drive, and headed home. The morning light hit Caleb's face at exactly 6:47 a.m., filtered through the thin curtains of his bedroom window. He woke the way he always did, instantly alert, his first thought reaching across the hall to make sure Lily was safe. The apartment was quiet except for the familiar sounds of the city waking up below. Car doors slamming, the distant wail of a siren, someone's dog barking 3 floors down. He lay still for a moment, letting the previous night reassemble itself in his mind. The gala, the champagne, Veronica Sterling swaying in her crimson dress, the drive through dark Chicago streets, her voice stripped of its usual armor, admitting loneliness in a way that had felt like watching someone bleed. His phone showed 3 missed texts, all from Marcus Webb. Dude, did you really drive Sterling home? People are talking. Call me when you wake up. This is wild. Caleb deleted them without responding. Whatever gossip was circulating through Sterling Industries could wait. Right now, he had more important responsibilities. He found Lily already awake, sitting cross-legged on her bed with her favorite stuffed elephant, a threadbare thing named Mr. Trunk that had been Emily's choice from the hospital gift shop 3 years ago. The morning sun caught her dark curls, making them glow like a halo. Daddy! She launched herself at him the moment he appeared in her doorway, small arms wrapping around his neck with the complete trust that still managed to undo him every single morning. Hey, butterfly, he murmured into her hair, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. Sleep good? I dreamed about the zoo, she announced, pulling back to look at him with Emily's eyes, dark brown and impossibly expressive. Can we go today, please? The penguins miss me. Caleb smiled despite the exhaustion still clinging to his bones. The penguins miss you, huh? They told you that? Yes. She said it with the complete seriousness only a 3-year-old could manage. They told me in my dream. That's how dreams work, Daddy. Well, if the penguins miss you, I guess we have to go. He tickled her gently, pulling out a laugh that sounded so much like Emily's it physically hurt. But first, pancakes. Deal? Deal. They moved through their morning routine with the practiced efficiency of a team that had been doing this for years. Caleb made pancakes shaped like elephants, or at least his best attempt, which looked more like blobs with trunks. Lily ate hers with enough syrup to constitute a health hazard, chattering nonstop about the penguin exhibit and how Mr. Trunk wanted to come too, but would need his own ticket. This was Caleb's real life. Not glittering galas or crystal chandeliers or driving CEOs through midnight streets. This was what mattered. A sticky 3-year-old Saturday morning pancakes and the fierce responsibility of being enough parent for a child who deserved 2. They were halfway through breakfast when his phone rang. Unknown number. Caleb almost let it go to voicemail. Saturday mornings were sacred time with Lily, but something made him answer. Hayes. Mr. Hayes. The voice was professional, female, unfamiliar. This is Karen Matsuda, Miss Sterling's personal assistant. Miss Sterling would like to speak with you if you have a moment. Caleb's stomach dropped. This was it. The consequences he'd known were coming. Whatever conversation was about to happen, it wouldn't be good news. I'm with my daughter right now, he said carefully. Can I call back in? Of course. Shall we say 11 o'clock? Ms. Sterling will be in her office. On a Saturday? A pause. Ms. Sterling is always in her office, Mr. Hayes. The call ended before he could respond. Caleb set his phone down and found Lily watching him with syrup-sticky concern. Who was that? She asked. Work stuff, butterfly. Nothing important. More important than penguins. Not even close. They spent the next 3 hours at Lincoln Park Zoo, Lily racing from exhibit to exhibit with the boundless energy of someone who hadn't yet learned that the world could be heavy. She pressed her face against the glass at the penguin habitat, narrating an elaborate story about Mr. Trunk becoming best friends with a penguin named Steve. Caleb watched her, his heart doing that thing it always did, swelling and breaking simultaneously. She was so much like Emily. The way she tilted her head when she was thinking, the way she bit her bottom lip when she was concentrating, the way she found joy in the smallest things, like a penguin waddling across artificial ice. Emily should have been here for this. Should have been the one Lily ran to with excited discoveries. Should have been the one braiding her hair and teaching her about kindness and showing her what love looked like. Instead, it was just Caleb, doing his best to be enough. By 10:45, he'd dropped Lily off with Mrs. Chen, who took one look at his face and asked no questions, and was driving towards Sterling Industries headquarters. The building looked different on a Saturday, less intimidating somehow. The lobby was quiet, just a security guard who waved him through after checking his ID. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt longer than usual. Caleb's reflection stared back at him from the polished steel doors, jeans and a polo shirt, a far cry from last night's suit. He hadn't dressed up on purpose. This was who he was. If Veronica Sterling wanted to fire him for helping her, she could fire the real version. The executive floor was eerily silent. No assistants rushing with files. No conference calls bleeding through closed doors. Just expensive carpet and abstract art, and the kind of quiet that only existed in places designed to intimidate. Karen Matsuda sat at her desk outside Veronica's office, looking exactly as put together as she probably did at 6 a.m. on a Monday. She offered Caleb a professional smile. "Mr. Hayes, Miss Sterling is expecting you. Go right in." Caleb nodded, his mouth suddenly dry. He knocked once on the heavy oak door. "Come in." Veronica's voice was steady, controlled, all traces of last night's vulnerability erased. Caleb pushed open the door. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city, her back to him. She'd traded the crimson gown for dark slacks and a cream silk blouse, her hair pulled back in a neat twist. Professional armor, fully restored. "Close the door," she said without turning around. Caleb did, the soft click sounding too loud in the quiet office. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Veronica kept her gaze fixed on the skyline, and Caleb waited, his heart hammering against his ribs. This was when she'd tell him that last night had been a mistake, that his employment at Sterling Industries was being terminated, that helping her had been a massive overstep of professional boundaries. Then she turned around, and Caleb saw her face. She looked tired. Not the exhaustion of a hangover, though he suspected that was part of it, but something deeper. The weariness of someone who'd spent all night confronting truths they'd been avoiding. "I owe you an apology," Veronica said. Of all the things Caleb had expected, that wasn't one of them. "Ma'am?" "Last night." She moved to her desk but didn't sit, instead gripping the edge like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "You saw me at my worst. You had every right to walk away, to let me deal with the consequences of my choices. Instead, you helped me. You drove me home. You made sure I was safe, and I—" She paused, the words seeming to cost her something. "I haven't thanked you properly." "You thanked me last night," Caleb said quietly. "I was drunk last night." Her voice sharpened with self-recrimination. "Today I'm sober, and today I'm telling you that what you did, the kindness you showed when you had no obligation to do so, that meant something, more than you probably realize." Caleb shifted his weight, uncomfortable with the intensity of her gratitude. "I just gave you a ride home. Anyone would have—" "No!" Veronica cut him off, her CEO voice emerging. "No, they wouldn't have. Everyone else at that gala looked the other way. They saw me stumbling and decided their careers were more important than basic human decency. You didn't. You saw someone who needed help, and you helped. That's rare, especially in my world." She moved around the desk, closing some of the distance between them. Up close, Caleb could see the faint shadows under her eyes, the careful makeup that didn't quite hide the evidence of a rough night. "I want you to know," she continued, "that nothing about last night will affect your position here. You won't face any professional consequences for helping me. And if anyone tries to use last night as gossip or leverage, they'll answer to me directly." "I appreciate that," Caleb said. "But honestly, I wasn't worried about consequences. I did what felt right." "Why?" The question came out sharper than she probably intended. "Why did you help me? We barely know each other. I'm not—" She stopped herself, regrouped. "I'm not exactly known for inspiring loyalty through kindness." Caleb met her gaze, steady and honest. "I told you last night. I know what it's like when nobody shows up. I wouldn't wish that feeling on anyone." Something in Veronica's expression cracked, just for a moment. "Your wife?" "Yeah." He looked away, focusing on a piece of abstract art on the wall that he suspected cost more than his car. "The night she died, I kept thinking about all the people who could have made different choices. The bartender who kept serving the guy who hit her, the friends who let him get behind the wheel, all these small moments where someone could have stepped in and didn't." He brought his gaze back to Veronica. "I can't bring Emily back, but I can choose to be the person who steps in, every time." The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. "I'm sorry," Veronica said quietly, "for your loss, and for making you relive it by asking. It's okay. Talking about her, it helps sometimes, keeps her real." Veronica moved to the window again, but this time her posture was different, less defensive. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "What you said last night about being scared." She kept her eyes on the skyline. "You were right. I am terrified of being seen as weak, of giving people ammunition to use against me. This company, I built it from almost nothing. I've had to be harder, sharper, more ruthless than any man in my position just to be taken half as seriously. Vulnerability isn't something I can afford." "Except you're human," Caleb said. "And humans aren't untouchable. We stumble. We have bad nights. We drink too much champagne at galas." He paused. "The people worth keeping in your life won't use that against you. They'll just make sure you get home safe." Veronica turned to look at him, and for the first time since he'd entered the office, she smiled. Small, genuine, edged with something that might have been hope. "You're very wise for someone who still has a booster seat in their car." Caleb laughed, surprised. "Yeah, well, 3-year-olds have a way of teaching you what matters." "Tell me about her," Veronica said suddenly. "Your daughter, Lily, right?" The request caught him off guard. In 2 years of working at Sterling Industries, Veronica Sterling had never asked him anything personal, had barely seemed to register his existence beyond quarterly performance reviews. Caleb felt his face soften the way it always did when talking about Lily. "She's everything. Smart, funny, completely fearless. This morning she informed me that the penguins at the zoo miss her and we had to visit immediately. She spent an hour explaining to me how Mr. Trunk, that's her elephant, is going to become a penguin scientist when he grows up. She sounds wonderful." "She is. She's the reason I get up every morning, the reason I work this hard. I want to give her the kind of life where she never has to worry about whether I'll show up, where she knows, no matter what, her dad will be there." Veronica's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across her features. "That's a gift, knowing someone will always show up for you. A lot of people never get that." The implication hung in the air between them, that she was one of those people. "It's not too late," Caleb said gently, "to build that kind of life, to let people in." "Isn't it?" She turned fully toward him now. "I'm 41 years old, Hayes. I've spent the last 15 years building walls so high, I'm not sure I remember how to tear them down. Most days, the only conversations I have are negotiations. The only relationships I maintain are strategic. I go home to that penthouse, and it's beautiful and empty, and I tell myself it's enough because it has to be." The honesty in her words was devastating. Caleb recognized it because he'd lived his own version, nights after Emily died when he'd held Lily and wondered if he'd ever feel whole again. When the emptiness had seemed permanent, a condition rather than a state. "It doesn't have to be enough," he said. "You just have to decide you're worth more than that." Veronica stared at him, and Caleb could see her processing the words, testing them against the armor she'd built. "How did you do it?" she asked. "After losing your wife, how did you not just give up?" Lily, he answered simply. I didn't have the luxury of giving up. She needed me, still needs me. But also, he searched for the right words. I realized that honoring Emily's memory didn't mean staying frozen in grief. It meant living the kind of life she would have wanted for us, full of love and laughter and all the messy, beautiful parts of being human. That's brave. No, Caleb shook his head. It's just the only way forward. Bravery would be having a choice and choosing the hard thing. I didn't have a choice. I just had a little girl who deserved a dad who tried. Veronica's phone buzzed on her desk, the first interruption since he'd entered. She glanced at it, then back at him. I should let you go, she said. I'm sure you have better things to do on a Saturday than listen to your CEO have an existential crisis. Actually, Caleb said, this is the most interesting conversation I've had in a while. But yeah, I should get back to Lily. Mrs. Chen can only take so much penguin talk. Veronica walked him to the door, but before he could leave, she spoke again. Hayes, Caleb. The use of his first name stopped him. Thank you, not just for last night, for this too, for being honest when you could have just told me what I wanted to hear. Any time, Caleb said, and meant it. He was halfway to the elevator when she called his name again. He turned. Veronica stood in her office doorway, backlit by the windows, looking smaller somehow without the massive desk and the city skyline framing her power. The penguins, she said. They're at Lincoln Park Zoo? Yeah, why? A pause. Then, I haven't been to a zoo since I was a kid. I'd forgotten they even existed. Something in her voice, a longing so carefully buried it almost didn't surface, made Caleb do something completely impulsive. Come with us next time, he offered. If you want, Lily would love to have someone else to explain penguin science to. Veronica's eyes widened slightly, surprise breaking through her careful control. You're serious? Completely. Fair warning, though, you'll need to endure detailed lectures about why penguins are better than every other animal, and you might have to carry Mr. Trunk when Lily's arms get tired. He's surprisingly heavy for a stuffed elephant. She laughed, a real laugh, not the calculated sound from business meetings. I'll keep that in mind. Think about it, Caleb said. No pressure. But the offer stands. He left before she could respond, stepping into the elevator with a strange lightness in his chest. The doors closed on Veronica's image. Still standing in her doorway, still processing the idea that someone had invited her into their world without wanting anything in return. When Caleb got back to Mrs. Chen's apartment, Lily was in the middle of building what she called Penguin City out of every pillow and blanket the elderly woman owned. She looked up as he entered, face bright with joy. Daddy, look! This is where Steve lives. Steve the penguin? Obviously. She said it like he was being deliberately dense. Mrs. Chen helped me make an ice rink out of aluminum foil. See? Caleb thanked Mrs. Chen, bundled up the pillows and Lily, and headed home. The rest of Saturday unfolded in the familiar rhythm of their life together. Lunch that Lily mostly wore instead of ate, a nap that she insisted she didn't need but fell into anyway, an afternoon spent coloring pictures of penguins that would join the dozens already decorating their refrigerator. As Caleb tucked her into bed that night, Lily reached up and touched his face with sticky fingers. She'd somehow gotten jam on herself after dinner, despite not eating anything with jam. Daddy? Yeah, butterfly? Are you happy? The question landed with unexpected weight. Caleb smoothed her dark curls back from her forehead, looking into eyes that saw more than a 3-year-old should. I'm happy right now, he said truthfully. Right here with you. Always happy right here. Good. She yawned, Mr. Trunk clutched tight against her chest. Because you smile nice, like Mommy used to. Caleb's throat closed. He kissed her forehead, breathing in strawberry shampoo and innocence. Sleep good, butterfly. Dream about penguins. And Steve. And Steve. He left her door cracked open, the nightlight casting its warm glow across her peaceful face. In the living room, he collapsed onto the couch that had witnessed 1,000 nights just like this. Him alone, the city quiet outside their windows, the weight of being enough parent pressing down like atmosphere. His phone buzzed. Unknown number again, but this time he recognized the pattern from this morning's call. A text message appeared. This is Veronica Sterling. Karen gave me your number. I hope that's acceptable. I wanted to say thank you again for today and to let you know I'm considering the Penguin invitation. Fair warning, I know nothing about children and will probably be terrible at this. But the offer meant something, so thank you for that too. Caleb stared at the message for a long moment. Then he typed back, "You don't have to be good at it. Just show up. That's the only thing that matters. Lily and I will handle the rest." The response came almost immediately. "Showing up. I can do that." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "How's Tuesday afternoon? I could take a few hours, if that works for you both." Caleb smiled at his phone, at the careful formality that couldn't quite hide the hope underneath. "Tuesday works. Meet us at the zoo entrance at 3. Prepare yourself for penguin facts." So many penguin facts. "I'll bring coffee." "Fair trade. I'll endure the penguin facts if you save me from falling asleep in the reptile house." "Deal." Caleb set his phone down and looked around his small apartment. The worn furniture, the crayon drawings, the booster seat by the door waiting for Monday morning, the photos of Emily scattered throughout, keeping her present in the life they were still building without her. This was his world. Small, simple, focused on what mattered. And somehow, impossibly, he'd just invited Veronica Sterling into it. He should probably be worried about what that meant, about boundaries and professional lines and all the ways this could get complicated. Instead, he felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years, curious about a future that might include more than just survival. In her penthouse across the city, Veronica stood at her windows looking out at the glittering skyline. Her phone sat on the marble counter, the text conversation still open. She'd built this empire, commanded this city, created a life that looked perfect from the outside. But she couldn't remember the last time someone had simply invited her to exist without an agenda. To show up not as the CEO or the closing deal or the strategic alliance, but just as a person who might enjoy watching a 3-year-old explain penguin science. It was terrifying. It was also, she admitted to herself in the quiet of her empty penthouse, the first thing in years that felt like hope. She looked at the untouched crystal glass still sitting on her coffee table. The water Caleb had poured last night, now evaporated to a faint ring on the expensive surface. Evidence that someone had cared. Veronica picked up the glass, washed it carefully, and set it back in the cabinet with the others. But she memorized the spot where it had sat. A small marker of the night her carefully constructed world had started to shift. Tuesday, she thought. Penguins and coffee and a little girl named Lily. She could do Tuesday. She could show up. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to start building something real. Tuesday afternoon arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that made Chicago feel like a postcard. Golden leaves scattered across the sidewalks. The air crisp enough to need a jacket, but warm enough that the sun felt like a gift. Caleb stood at the zoo entrance with Lily bouncing beside him, Mr. Trunk tucked under her arm, her eyes scanning every person who walked past. "Is she here yet?" Lily asked for the 7th time in 5 minutes. "Not yet, Butterfly. Remember what I said. Ms. Sterling is very busy. She might be a little late." "But she's coming, right? You promised." "I said she might come." "There's a difference." Lily's face scrunched up in concentration, processing this distinction with the seriousness of someone negotiating international treaties. "But you said she wanted to meet Steve." "I said she wanted to see the penguins. Steve is your imaginary penguin friend. She doesn't know about him yet." "Then I'll introduce them." Lily announced this like it solved everything. Caleb smiled despite the nervous energy coiling in his stomach. He'd been second-guessing this invitation since Saturday night. What had he been thinking? Inviting his CEO to spend an afternoon at the zoo with his 3-year-old daughter crossed so many professional lines he'd lost count. If this went badly, if Veronica showed up and realized how absurd the whole thing was, if Lily said something embarrassing, "Caleb?" He turned. Veronica stood 10 feet away, and for a moment he didn't recognize her. She'd traded her usual armor of designer suits and sharp heels for dark jeans, ankle boots, and a camel-colored sweater that made her look softer somehow, younger. Her hair was down, falling in loose waves past her shoulders instead of pulled back in its usual severe twist. She held 2 coffee cups and wore an expression that hovered somewhere between nervous and determined. "You came," Caleb said, surprised by the relief in his own voice. I said I would. She walked closer, offering him one of the cups. I wasn't sure how you take your coffee, so I brought cream and sugar on the side. Black is perfect. Thank you. Lily had gone uncharacteristically quiet, staring up at Veronica with wide eyes. Caleb recognized the look, his daughter trying to figure out if this stranger was friend or threat, safe or dangerous. Veronica seemed to recognize the scrutiny too. She crouched down slowly, bringing herself to Lily's eye level with careful precision. Hi, she said softly. You must be Lily. I'm Veronica. Your dad invited me to meet the penguins. Lily clutched Mr. Trunk tighter. Do you like penguins? I don't know yet. I've never really spent time with them. But your dad said you're an expert, so I was hoping you could teach me. Something in Lily's expression shifted, the wariness replaced by the kind of pride only a 3-year-old could muster when given important responsibility. I know everything about penguins, she announced. Everything, even the science parts. That's very impressive. Veronica's smile was genuine, not the practice curve Caleb saw in board meetings. I'm looking forward to learning. This is Mr. Trunk. Lily held up her elephant. He's going to be a penguin scientist, but first he has to learn penguin language. Of course, Veronica nodded seriously, as if this made perfect sense. That seems like an important first step. Lily's face broke into a brilliant smile, her judgment apparently rendered. She grabbed Veronica's free hand with sticky fingers. Caleb caught the flash of expensive leather purse she'd set down to accept the contact and started pulling. Come on, Steve is waiting. They entered the zoo with Lily leading the way, chattering nonstop about penguin facts she'd learned from nature documentaries and picture books. Veronica listened with what appeared to be genuine interest, asking questions that made Lily elaborate with increasing enthusiasm. Caleb walked slightly behind them, watching this surreal tableau unfold. Veronica Sterling, the woman whose quarterly earnings calls moved markets, was being lectured about penguin mating habits by his 3-year-old daughter. And she was taking notes. Actual notes. On her phone. You don't have to do that, Caleb said quietly when Lily ran ahead to look at the flamingos. Do what? Pretend to be fascinated. I know penguin trivia isn't exactly riveting material. Veronica looked at him, surprise evident in her expression. I'm not pretending. Did you know that emperor penguins can hold their breath for over 20 minutes? That's remarkable. Lily just taught me that. She also told you that penguins can fly if they believe hard enough. Well, Veronica's lips twitched. I'm choosing to fact-check that one later. They moved through the zoo at Lily's pace, which meant stopping at every exhibit for detailed analysis and imaginary conversations between Mr. Trunk and the animals. At the red panda habitat, Lily decided Mr. Trunk and the pandas were having a tea party. At the lions, she explained that the male lion was tired because he'd stayed up late reading penguin books. Caleb kept waiting for Veronica to check her phone, to make an excuse about work emergencies, to remember that she was a CEO with better things to do than watch a toddler assign personalities to zoo animals. Instead, she crouched beside Lily at every stop, asking questions, offering observations, treating his daughter's imagination with the same respect she probably gave million-dollar acquisitions. When they finally reached the penguin exhibit, Lily pressed her face against the glass with reverent silence. The colony was active today, diving, swimming, waddling across the rocks with their distinctive gait. There's Steve, Lily whispered, pointing to one penguin who looked exactly like all the others. How do you know it's Steve? Veronica asked. Because he's the one who told me about penguin dreams. See how he's looking at the water? He's thinking about flying under the ice. Penguins fly in the water, did you know? That's their special magic. I didn't know that. Veronica's voice was soft, almost reverent. But I'm glad you told me. They stayed there for 20 minutes, Lily providing running commentary on penguin social dynamics, Veronica asking thoughtful questions that made Lily beam with pride. Caleb stood back, his coffee long finished, watching two of the most important people in his world connect over flightless birds in childhood wonder. Eventually, Lily's attention span reached its limit. Can we get ice cream, please? Mr. Trunk wants chocolate. Mr. Trunk has expensive taste, Caleb said, but he was already steering them toward the zoo's cafe. They found a table in the shade, Lily demolishing a chocolate cone that was definitely too big for her, while Veronica and Caleb shared a bench nearby. The afternoon had stretched into early evening, the sun painting everything in amber light. "Thank you for this," Veronica said quietly, watching Lily chase a butterfly with Mr. Trunk held high like a flag. "I can't remember the last time I spent an afternoon just existing, without agendas or objectives or people wanting something." Lily definitely wants something. She wants you to acknowledge Steve's existence. Steve is very real to her. That's what matters. Caleb glanced at Veronica, surprised by the insight. "You're good with her. I wasn't sure, no offense, but I wasn't sure how you'd be with kids." "Honestly, neither was I." Veronica took a sip of her coffee, which had to be cold by now. "I've spent so much time being the person everyone expects me to be that I'd forgotten what it feels like to just be present. Lily doesn't care that I'm a CEO. She cares that I listen when she talks about Steve. That's her superpower. She sees people, not positions. She gets that from you." Veronica turned to look at him directly. "You saw me. At the gala. Everyone else saw the CEO having a bad night. You saw a person who needed help." Caleb shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I just did what anyone should do." "But most people don't. That's the point." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I've been thinking about what you said, about letting people in, about being worth more than the walls I've built. And it's terrifying." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "For 15 years, I've controlled every variable. Every relationship has been strategic. Every conversation has had an objective. The idea of just connecting with someone without an endgame? I don't even know what that looks like." "It looks like this," Caleb said simply, gesturing to the zoo around them. "Spending a Tuesday afternoon watching penguins. No agenda, no objectives, just showing up because someone invited you." Veronica was quiet for a long moment, her gaze following Lily's joyful circles around the picnic area. "I like it," she said finally. "Showing up without an endgame. It feels lighter." "Daddy, Ms. Veronica!" Lily came running back, breathless and sticky. "Mr. Trunk says we should come back next week. He wants to introduce Steve to the otters." Caleb looked at Veronica, giving her an easy out. "We usually come on Saturdays, but you're probably busy." "Saturday works," Veronica interrupted, "if the invitation stands." "Really?" "Really." She smiled at Lily. "But only if you promise to teach me about otters, too. I'm very behind on my marine mammal education." Lily threw herself at Veronica in a spontaneous hug that caught them both off guard. Caleb saw Veronica stiffen for just a moment before her arms came around his daughter, careful but genuine. "Thank you for coming to meet Steve," Lily said into Veronica's sweater. "Thank you for introducing us," Veronica replied, her voice thick with emotion Caleb wasn't sure she wanted anyone to notice. The walk back to the parking lot felt different than the walk in. Easier, somehow. Lily chattered between them, holding both their hands, swinging herself forward in that way that made Caleb's back ache, but was too precious to stop. At Veronica's car, sleek, expensive, exactly what Caleb would have expected, she paused before getting in. "Can I ask you something?" she said to Caleb while Lily was distracted by a nearby dog. "Sure." "Why did you really invite me? I mean, I know what you said, but this..." She gestured at the zoo behind them. "This is your world. Your time with Lily. You could have kept it separate from work. From me. Why didn't you?" Caleb considered the question, aware that his answer mattered more than casual conversation. "Because I watched you that night at the gala," he said carefully. "And I saw someone who'd forgotten what it felt like to be treated like a person instead of a position. I thought maybe an afternoon with a 3-year-old who doesn't care about your quarterly earnings might remind you." "Did it work?" "You tell me." Veronica smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. The same genuine warmth he'd glimpsed when she'd crouched down to meet Lily. "Yeah," she said softly. "It worked." She got into her car, then rolled down the window. "Saturday, then. Same time?" "Same time. Fair warning, Lily's already planning a comprehensive otter curriculum. I'll study up." She pulled out of the parking lot with a wave that Lily returned enthusiastically. Caleb buckled Lily into her booster seat, her eyes already heavy with the exhaustion that came from afternoon adventures. "I like Ms. Veronica," Lily announced as they drove home. "She listened to all my penguin facts, even the long ones." "She did," Caleb agreed, navigating through early evening traffic. "Is she your friend now?" The question was innocent, but it hit Caleb with unexpected weight. Was Veronica his friend? The concept seemed absurd. She was his boss, his CEO, someone who existed in a completely different stratosphere of wealth and power. They had nothing in common except the strange intimacy of one champagne-soaked night and a shared afternoon at the zoo. And yet, "I think maybe she is," Caleb said. "Or she could be." "Good," Lily yawned. Mr. Trunk clutched against her chest. "Everyone needs friends, even important people." Out of the mouths of babes, Caleb thought, smiling at his daughter in the rearview mirror. The rest of the week unfolded with a strange new rhythm. At work, nothing overtly changed. Veronica was still the CEO, still commanded meetings with the same sharp intelligence, still made decisions that affected thousands of employees. But in small moments, a brief smile when she passed Caleb in the hallway, a question about Lily during a morning briefing, the way she actually waited for his input during strategic discussions, something had shifted. The other employees noticed, of course. Whispers followed Caleb through the break room, speculation barely disguised as casual conversation. Marcus cornered him by the coffee machine on Thursday. "Dude, what is going on with you and Sterling?" "Nothing," Caleb said, which was technically true and completely insufficient. "Bullshit. She smiled at you this morning. Actually smiled. I've worked here 5 years and I've never seen her smile at anyone below director level." "Maybe she's just in a good mood." "Veronica Sterling doesn't have moods. She has quarterly objectives." Marcus lowered his voice. "Seriously, man. People are talking. They think you're, I'm not sleeping with my boss, Marcus. Jesus." "Then what?" "Because something changed after that gala. You drove her home, she's suddenly treating you like you matter, and now she's asking about your kid in meetings. Connect the dots." Caleb wanted to explain that the dots connected to something much simpler and more complicated than office politics. That he'd offered basic human kindness to someone who'd forgotten what that felt like. That Veronica was just a person who was lonely and trying to figure out how to be less lonely. That friendship could exist without ulterior motives. But he knew how that would sound. How impossible it would seem to people who'd built their entire careers on strategic relationships and calculated networking. "We're friends," Caleb said finally. "That's it. She's going through some stuff. I offered to listen, and we're friends now." Marcus stared at him like he'd announced plans to colonize Mars. "You're friends. With Veronica Sterling. The Veronica Sterling. Is that really so hard to believe?" "Yes," Marcus said flatly. "That is literally impossible to believe. But okay, man. Whatever you say." He walked away shaking his head, leaving Caleb alone with his coffee and the uncomfortable awareness that this situation was more complicated than he'd wanted to admit. Saturday arrived with Lily's enthusiasm reaching fever pitch. She'd prepared what she called the Otter presentation, which consisted of crayon drawings and facts she'd memorized from YouTube videos. Mr. Trunk had been given a ceremonial bath in preparation for meeting his otter friends. They met Veronica at the zoo entrance at 3 o'clock sharp. She was dressed similarly to the previous week, jeans, comfortable shoes, her hair loose, but this time she'd brought a backpack. "I came prepared," she announced, pulling out a field guide to North American mammals. "I studied." Lily's eyes went wide with delight. "You did homework!" "Of course, I'm a good student." Veronica's smile was conspiratorial. "Plus, I didn't want to embarrass myself in front of Mr. Trunk. He seems like a tough critic." They fell into an easy rhythm, moving through the zoo with Lily as their enthusiastic guide. The otter exhibit became a 40-minute deep dive into otter social structures, hunting techniques, and Lily's theory that otters were actually penguins who'd learned to live on land. "That's scientifically questionable," Caleb pointed out. "Science doesn't know everything, Daddy," Lily replied with the absolute certainty of someone who'd been alive for 3 years. Veronica laughed, the same genuine sound that had surprised Caleb at her office. "She's got a point. The greatest discoveries come from questioning conventional wisdom." Please don't encourage her, Caleb said, but he was smiling. They grabbed lunch at the zoo cafe, Lily monopolizing the conversation with detailed explanations of otter grooming habits, while Veronica listened with the focus she probably brought to board presentations. Caleb watched them, his daughter and his CEO bonding over marine mammals, and felt something shift in his chest. This was real. Whatever was developing between them, the strange friendship that defied logic and professional boundaries, it was genuine. Veronica wasn't performing. She was just present, engaged, human. After lunch, while Lily was distracted by the butterfly exhibit, Veronica and Caleb found themselves sitting on a bench in the shade. "Can I tell you something?" Veronica said, her gaze following Lily's excited movements. "Of course." "I went home after Tuesday and I cried." She said it matter-of-factly, like reporting quarterly earnings. "I sat in my penthouse with all my expensive furniture and my view of the city, and I cried because I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd laughed like I did watching Lily explain penguin politics. The last time someone wanted my company without wanting something from me." Caleb didn't know what to say to that kind of honesty, so he just waited. "I've built this incredible life," Veronica continued. "Success that most people dream about, financial security, professional respect, and I'm miserable." She turned to look at him. "That night at the gala, when you found me, I was so drunk because the alternative was acknowledging how lonely I am, how empty everything feels when you've optimized your entire existence for achievement instead of connection." "You don't have to stay that way," Caleb said quietly. "Lonely, I mean. You're choosing to show up here, aren't you? That's the first step. Is it enough? Just showing up? It's everything. Showing up is how you build a life worth living. One afternoon at a time, one conversation at a time, one moment where you choose connection over control." Veronica was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, "I'm scared I don't know how to do this. How to have friendships without strategy. How to let people see me without calculating the risk." "You're doing it right now," Caleb pointed out. "You're here. You're being honest. You're letting a 3-year-old teach you about otters without trying to turn it into a networking opportunity." She laughed, surprised. "When you put it that way, it sounds almost simple." "It is simple. We just convince ourselves it's complicated because simple feels vulnerable." "Daddy, Miss Veronica!" Lily came running over, breathless and happy. "The butterflies are doing a dance. You have to come see." They spent the rest of the afternoon following Lily's lead, moving from exhibit to exhibit with no agenda beyond her curiosity. As the sun started to set, painting the zoo in golden light, Caleb felt the strangest sensation: contentment. Not the desperate happiness of early grief, where every good moment felt like stealing something from the darkness. Not the exhausted satisfaction of just getting through another day, but actual contentment. The quiet recognition that right now, in this moment, he had enough. At the parking lot, Lily gave Veronica another spontaneous hug, this one less surprising and more familiar. "Same time next week?" Veronica asked, and Caleb heard the hope threaded through the casualness. "We'll be here," he promised. As they drove home, Lily already half asleep in her booster seat, Caleb's phone buzzed. A text from Veronica. "Thank you for today, for letting me be part of this. I know I keep saying thank you, but I don't know what else to say. You and Lily are giving me something I didn't know I was missing. V." Caleb waited until he was home, until Lily was tucked into bed with Mr. Trunk and her otter drawings, before responding. "You don't have to keep thanking us. You're not intruding. You're not a charity case. You're just someone we enjoy spending time with. That's allowed to be simple." "See." The response came quickly. "Simple. I'm trying to learn simple. It's harder than running a company, but I think it might be worth it." Caleb smiled at his phone, at this glimpse of the person Veronica was becoming when she let her walls down. "It's worth it. Trust me, I'm starting to." Over the next 3 weeks, Saturday zoo trips became routine. Veronica showed up every week, always on time, always prepared with some new field guide or documentary fact to share with Lily. The three of them developed inside jokes: the lazy panda they'd named Gerald, Lily's theory that zebras were just horses who'd discovered fashion, the ongoing saga of whether Mr. Trunk preferred marine mammals or big cats. At work, The dynamic shifted in ways both subtle and significant. Veronica started asking Caleb's opinion, not just in meetings, but in casual hallway conversations. She remembered Lily's birthday was coming up and asked what 3-year-olds liked without any professional context. She stopped by his desk one afternoon just to share a funny article about penguin behavior she'd found. The office gossip reached a crescendo, whispers about inappropriate relationships and favoritism. HR even called Caleb in for what they termed a routine check-in that was clearly an investigation into whether anything unethical was happening. He told them the truth. They were friends. Nothing romantic, nothing inappropriate, just two people who'd connected over shared humanity and Saturday zoo trips. The HR director looked skeptical, but had no grounds for action. Caleb left the meeting frustrated, but not surprised. People couldn't comprehend that powerful women and regular guys could be genuine friends without ulterior motives. He mentioned it to Veronica during their next Saturday together, while Lily was distracted by the seal exhibit. HR pulled me in, he said. Asked about our relationship. Veronica's expression darkened. What did you tell them? The truth, that we're friends. And they didn't believe me, but they can't do anything about it because we haven't violated any policies. He paused. Does it bother you? The gossip? It bothers me that people can't imagine I might value friendship as much as professional advancement, Veronica said, her voice tight with controlled anger. But no, it doesn't bother me enough to stop coming here. Does it bother you? Not even a little. Let them talk. Veronica studied him, something shifting in her expression. You really don't care what people think, do you? I care what Lily thinks. I care what you think. Beyond that? He shrugged. Life's too short to waste on people who are determined to misunderstand you. When did you get so wise? Around the time I realized that the only approval I needed was my own. He smiled. And Lily's. She's a tough critic. As if summoned, Lily came running back. Ms. Veronica, the seals are clapping. I think they're clapping for you because you're wearing blue and blue is their favorite color. Is that so? Veronica crouched down, giving Lily her full attention. How do you know blue is their favorite color? Because they live in water, and water is blue, obviously. Obviously, Veronica agreed seriously. That's excellent logical reasoning, Lily. Caleb watched them together, his daughter and this woman who'd become such an unexpected part of their lives, and felt something he hadn't felt since Emily died. Not love exactly. Not yet. But the possibility of it. The recognition that his heart, which he'd thought was permanently closed, might be learning to open again. It terrified him. It also felt like hope. That hope became complicated on a Wednesday morning in late October when Lily woke up burning with fever. Caleb pressed his hand to her forehead and felt his stomach drop. She was radiating heat like a small furnace, her cheeks flushed crimson, her eyes glassy and unfocused. Daddy, she whimpered, clutching Mr. Trunk. I don't feel good. I know, Butterfly. Let me get the thermometer. 103.7. High enough to make his hands shake as he called the pediatrician's office. High enough to trigger memories of every terrifying childhood illness article he'd ever read. The nurse told him to give her ibuprofen and monitor her closely, bring her in if the fever climbed higher or didn't break within 24 hours. Caleb called work from Lily's bedside, leaving a message with his supervisor about taking a sick day. Then he settled in for what he knew would be a long stretch of watching his daughter's small chest rise and fall, checking her temperature every hour, offering sips of water she was too miserable to want. By noon, his phone was buzzing with work emails he couldn't focus on. By 2, he'd watched Lily's favorite movie 3 times while she dozed fitfully against his chest. By 4, when his phone rang with Veronica's name on the screen, he almost didn't answer. Hey, he said quietly, trying not to disturb Lily. Caleb? Your supervisor said you called out sick. Are you okay? The concern in Veronica's voice was immediate and genuine. I'm fine. Lily's running a fever. Nothing serious, just she needs me home. How high? Started at 103.7 this morning. Got it down to 102 with medicine, but she's miserable. A pause. Do you need anything? I could send someone with supplies or... We're okay. I've done this before. He had Multiple times, but it never got easier. The helplessness of watching his daughter suffer, the fear that lingered at the edges of every childhood fever. Caleb, Veronica's voice softened. You don't have to do everything alone. I could come by after work. Bring soup or medicine or just... I could be there, if you want. The offer caught him off guard. In the 6 weeks since that first zoo trip, they'd carefully maintained boundaries. Saturday afternoons were theirs, but the rest of the week stayed separate. Work was work, personal was personal, and the two didn't cross except in casual hallway conversations. Having Veronica in his apartment, in his actual life beyond zoo visits, felt like crossing a line they'd been carefully avoiding. You don't have to do that, Caleb said. I know I don't have to. I'm offering because I want to. A pause. Friends show up for each other, right? You taught me that. Something in Caleb's chest loosened. Okay, yeah. If you want to come by, that would be... Lily would probably like to see you. Text me your address. I'll be there around 6. Lily perked up slightly when Caleb told her Ms. Veronica was coming over, though the fever kept her mostly listless. He did a frantic speed clean of the apartment, shoving toys into bins, wiping down surfaces, trying to make the place look less like a single dad's survival bunker and more like an actual home. Then he stopped himself. This was his life. If Veronica couldn't handle the reality of plastic dinosaurs on the coffee table and crayon drawings covering the refrigerator, then maybe this friendship wasn't as real as he'd thought. She arrived at 6:15 with grocery bags in both hands. Caleb opened the door to find her still in work clothes, tailored slacks and a silk blouse, but she'd lost the heels somewhere, standing in his hallway in stocking feet. I brought chicken soup, she said, stepping inside. The good kind from that place on Michigan Avenue. And also popsicles, because I read that frozen treats can help with fevers, and children's ibuprofen because you can never have too much. And ginger ale, and crackers, and... She stopped, seeming to realize she was rambling. I might have panicked in the store. Caleb took the bags, fighting a smile. This is enough food for a month. I didn't know what she'd want, or what you'd need, so I got everything. Ms. Veronica? Lily's small voice came from the couch, where she was bundled in blankets with Mr. Trunk. Veronica's expression transformed, concern replacing uncertainty. She crossed to the couch and knelt beside it with the same careful attention she'd shown at the zoo. Hi, sweetheart. Your dad told me you're not feeling well. I have a fever, Lily said seriously. 102.3. That's very hot. That is very hot. Are you being brave? Very brave. Even Mr. Trunk is proud of me. I'm proud of you too. Veronica brushed a strand of damp hair from Lily's forehead with surprising tenderness. I brought popsicles. Do you think a popsicle might make you feel a little better? Lily's eyes brightened slightly. What kind? Cherry, orange, and grape. You can have whichever you want. Cherry, please. Caleb found himself standing in his small kitchen watching Veronica unwrap a popsicle for his feverish daughter, the surreal quality of the moment almost overwhelming. This was Veronica Sterling, billionaire CEO, the woman who commanded boardrooms and influenced markets, kneeling on his worn carpet, trying to coax a smile from a sick 3-year-old, and she looked completely natural doing it. They settled into an easy rhythm. Veronica heated the soup while Caleb got Lily situated with her popsicle in a new episode of her favorite show. When the soup was ready, Veronica brought it over in small portions that Lily could manage between popsicle bites. This is weird, Lily announced after a few spoonfuls. Weird bad or weird good? Caleb asked. Weird good. It tastes like fancy soup. Veronica laughed. It is fancy soup from a fancy restaurant, but I think it works for sick days too. I like it. Lily took another careful sip, then looked at Veronica with serious eyes. Are you staying for dinner? Caleb started to say she didn't have to, but Veronica answered first. If it's okay with your dad, I'd like to stay. Make sure you're feeling better. Daddy, can she stay? Of course she can stay. So Veronica stayed. She kicked off her work clothes for a pair of Caleb's sweatpants and an old college t-shirt that hung loose on her frame. She looked completely different without the armor of designer labels, younger, softer, more like the person she was becoming on Saturday afternoons. They ate soup together while Lily dozed on the couch, her fever finally starting to break. Caleb found himself telling Veronica about the early days after Emily died, the overwhelming terror of being solely responsible for a tiny human, the nights when Lily had been sick and he'd called the pediatrician's emergency line at 3 a.m., convinced she was dying, the slow learning curve of single parenthood. "I don't know how you did it," Veronica said quietly. "How you survived that and still showed up for her every day." "I didn't have a choice. She needed me." Caleb set down his spoon, the memories still raw even 3 years later. "But honestly, there were days I wasn't sure I could, days when the grief was so heavy I could barely breathe, and then Lily would smile at me or say something ridiculous, or need me to find Mr. Trunk, and I'd realize I could do it. Just one more day, and then another, until the days started to add up to a life again. That's remarkable. It's survival. Any parent would do the same. Not every parent." Something shadowed Veronica's expression. Some people run from responsibility, from the hard parts. Caleb heard the weight behind those words. "Your parents?" She looked surprised that he'd guessed. "My father, mostly. He was brilliant, business genius, everyone said. Built his company from nothing, but he was also absent, emotionally unavailable on a good day, cruel when he'd been drinking. My mother stayed because leaving meant losing her lifestyle. I learned early that love was conditional, that people only showed up when you had something to offer them." "Is that why you became untouchable?" "Partly." Veronica traced the rim of her soup bowl with one finger. "If nobody could get close enough to hurt you, you'd never be disappointed, never be abandoned. It seemed safer. But it was lonely. Desperately lonely." She met his gaze. "Until you offered to drive me home from a gala. Until you invited me to meet some penguins. Until you showed me that showing up doesn't have to come with conditions." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken understanding. Caleb felt the shift happening, the friendship they'd been carefully building starting to transform into something that scared him with its potential. On the couch, Lily stirred, mumbling something about otters in her sleep. The spell broke gently. "I should check her temperature again," Caleb said, grateful for the interruption. Lily's fever had dropped to 100.1, still elevated but moving in the right direction. Caleb got her settled more comfortably, adjusting her blankets, making sure Mr. Trunk was within reach. When he returned to the kitchen, Veronica was washing their soup bowls with careful attention. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I want to help. You brought soup and popsicles and sat with a feverish toddler for 3 hours. You've already helped." Veronica turned off the water, drying her hands on a dish towel that had seen better days. "Can I ask you something? And I need you to be completely honest." "Okay. What is this? Between us?" She gestured at the space connecting them. "We're friends, I know that. But it feels like—" She stopped, searching for words. "Like it's becoming something more. And I need to know if I'm imagining that, or if you feel it too." Caleb's heart hammered against his ribs. He could deflect, pretend he didn't know what she meant, keep things safe and uncomplicated. Instead, he chose honesty. "I feel it too," he said quietly. "And it terrifies me." "Because of Emily?" "Partly, but also because you're my boss, Veronica. You're a billionaire CEO, and I'm a mid-level analyst with a daughter and a dented car and a life that's about as far from your world as possible. What we have right now, these Saturdays, this friendship, it works because the boundaries are clear. If we cross that line into something more, everything gets complicated." "It's already complicated," Veronica said. "People at work are gossiping, HR is watching, and I'm—" Her voice cracked slightly. "I'm falling for you, Caleb. For you and Lily and this life you've built out of grief and love and showing up every day. I'm falling for Saturday afternoons and penguin facts and the way you see people instead of positions. And I don't know what to do with that." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest and impossible to take back. Caleb wanted to close the distance, wanted to take her hand and tell her he was falling too, had been falling since that night in the car when she'd admitted her loneliness and he'd recognized himself in her words. Wanted to believe that two people from completely different worlds could build something real. But he had Lily to think about. his daughter, who'd already lost one mother, who'd gotten attached to Veronica over zoo trips and Saturday afternoons. If this went wrong, if he and Veronica tried and failed, it wouldn't just break his heart, it would break Lily's too. "I need time," he said finally, "to think about what this means, what it could mean for Lily if we try and it doesn't work." Pain flickered across Veronica's face, but she nodded. "I understand. She comes first. She should come first. It's not that I don't—" Caleb stopped, regrouped. "I care about you, more than I expected to, more than I know what to do with. But I can't be reckless with Lily's heart, or yours, or mine. So what do we do? I don't know. Keep being friends, take it slow, figure out if what we feel is real or just—" He gestured helplessly. "Proximity and loneliness and two people who understand each other's pain? It's real for me," Veronica said quietly. "I've never felt this with anyone. Not in any of my previous relationships, not in all my years of strategic networking. You see me, Caleb. The actual me. Not the CEO, not the empire, not the reputation, just me. And that's—" Her voice broke. "That's everything." Caleb's resolve cracked. He crossed the small kitchen in 2 steps and pulled her into his arms. Nothing romantic, just comfort, just two people holding each other in the wreckage of honest feelings. Veronica buried her face against his shoulder, her breath warm through his t-shirt. They stood like that for a long moment, the only sound Lily's soft breathing from the living room and the distant hum of city traffic outside. "I'm scared," Veronica whispered. "Me too. What if we ruin this? What we have now? What if we don't? What if it's even better?" She pulled back enough to look at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You really think it could work? You and me? I think," Caleb chose his words carefully, "I think we'd be stupid not to try. But I also think we need to be smart about it. For Lily. For both of us. Slow then, we take it slow. Very slow. Glacially slow. I can do slow." Veronica managed a small smile. "I've spent 6 weeks learning about penguins from a 3-year-old. I think I can handle taking things one day at a time." From the couch, Lily's voice cut through the moment. "Daddy, I need more popsicle." They broke apart, laughing softly at the perfect timing. Caleb went to check on Lily while Veronica retrieved another cherry popsicle from the freezer. The rest of the evening passed in comfortable domesticity, Lily's fever continuing to drop, the 3 of them watching nature documentaries while sharing popsicles. Veronica reading Lily a bedtime story in a voice that made even Caleb want to curl up and listen. When Lily was finally asleep, tucked into bed with Mr. Trunk and her fever down to 99.2, Veronica gathered her work clothes and prepared to leave. At the door, she turned back to Caleb. "Saturday?" she asked. "Same time?" "Same time," he confirmed. "Though Lily's been talking about the reptile house. Fair warning. I'll study up on snakes." She paused, then reached out and squeezed his hand, brief, warm, full of promise. "Thank you for tonight, for letting me be here, for being honest about being scared. Thank you for showing up with half a grocery store's worth of soup. I panicked. I noticed. It was sweet." She smiled, real and unguarded, then slipped out into the hallway. Caleb watched her go, his hand still warm from her touch, his heart doing complicated things in his chest. He cleaned up the remnants of their evening, empty popsicle wrappers, soup containers, the sweatpants and t-shirt Veronica had worn now folded neatly on his couch with a note. "Borrowing these, I'll wash and return them Saturday. Thank you for everything. V." Caleb held the note for a moment, studying her handwriting. Neat, precise, with just a hint of the vulnerability she was learning to show. This was happening. Whatever this was between them, it was real, and it was happening, and it terrified him. But it also felt like the first truly alive thing he'd felt since Emily died. The next few days at work carried a new tension. Veronica maintained her professional distance in meetings, but Caleb caught her watching him with an expression that made his breath catch. Small moments accumulated, her hand brushing his when she passed him a file, the way she asked about Lily's recovery with genuine concern, the private smile they shared across the conference room when someone said something particularly ridiculous. People noticed, of course, The gossip intensified. Marcus pulled him aside on Friday with barely concealed excitement. Dude, Sterling just defended you in the exec meeting. Anderson was trying to throw you under the bus for that delayed report, and she shut him down. Said your work was exemplary, and anyone questioning it could take it up with her directly. Caleb's stomach tightened. She shouldn't have done that. Are you kidding? It was amazing. Anderson looked like he'd been slapped. But also, Marcus lowered his voice. People are definitely talking about you two. It's getting intense. There's nothing to talk about. We're friends. Friends who defend each other in exec meetings. Friends who smile at each other like that. Friends who... Marcus stopped, studying Caleb's face. Oh my God, you're in love with her. I'm not. You are. Holy shit. You're actually in love with Veronica Sterling. Caleb didn't deny it. Couldn't deny it. The realization settled over him like inevitability. He was falling in love with her, with the woman who studied field guides to impress his daughter, who showed up with too much soup when Lily was sick, who was learning to be vulnerable after years of being untouchable. It's complicated, he said finally. It's insane, Marcus corrected, but also kind of incredible. I mean, if anyone could make Veronica Sterling human, it would be you and your penguin-obsessed kid. She was always human. She just forgot how to show it. Marcus shook his head, still processing. This is either going to be the greatest love story I've ever witnessed or the most spectacular crash and burn. There's no middle ground. Thanks for the vote of confidence. Hey, I'm rooting for you, genuinely. You deserve good things, man. You've been through hell. If Sterling makes you happy, then I hope it works out. The words stayed with Caleb through the rest of Friday and into Saturday morning. As he got Lily ready for the zoo, her fever long gone, her energy restored to full chaos, he thought about what Marcus had said. There was no middle ground. Either he and Veronica would find a way to build something real, or they'd destroy the friendship they'd carefully constructed. But maybe some things were worth the risk. Lily bounced the entire drive to the zoo, chattering about snake facts she'd learned from her nature shows. When they arrived, Veronica was already waiting, jeans, comfortable shoes, hair pulled back, his washed sweatpants and t-shirt folded neatly in a bag. She handed him with a shy smile. Clean, as promised. You really didn't have to wash them. I wanted to. It gave me an excuse to think about Wednesday night. She paused, then added quietly, Thank you for that, for letting me in. Before Caleb could respond, Lily launched herself at Veronica with her usual enthusiasm. Ms. Veronica, we're seeing snakes today, and maybe lizards. And Mr. Trunk is very excited, even though he's a little bit scared because elephants and snakes have historical tension. Veronica crouched down, giving Lily her full attention. Historical tension. That sounds serious. Very serious, but Mr. Trunk is being brave because he's a scientist, and scientists have to study everything, even if it's scary. That's very wise of Mr. Trunk. They entered the zoo, Lily leading them toward the reptile house with determination. But this time, as they walked, Veronica's hand found Caleb's, tentative at first, then sure when he squeezed back. It was small, just fingers intertwined, palms pressed together, the simple contact of two people choosing each other. But it felt like everything. Lily looked back and saw their joined hands. Her face lit up with a smile that could have powered the entire city. Are you and Ms. Veronica holding hands? Is that okay? Caleb asked. Lily considered this with the seriousness of a Supreme Court justice. Then she grabbed Veronica's other hand, completing the chain. Now we're all holding hands, she announced, like a family. Caleb felt his throat close. Veronica's fingers tightened in his, and when he looked at her, he saw tears she was too dignified to let fall. Like a family, Veronica repeated softly, and the hope in those 3 words nearly undid him. They walked into the reptile house together, 3 people learning what it meant to choose each other, one Saturday afternoon at a time. The word family hung in the air between them as they moved through the dimly lit corridors of the reptile house, Lily's small hand connecting them like a bridge between 2 lives that were learning to merge. Caleb felt the weight of it, the hope and terror wrapped into 3 syllables spoken with the complete certainty only a child could muster. Veronica's fingers trembled slightly in his, and he knew she felt it too. The enormity of what they were building, the fragility of it, the way everything could shatter if they weren't careful. But Lily was already moving on, dragging them toward a glass enclosure housing a massive python. She pressed her face against the barrier. Mr. Trunk held it eye level so he could see too. "Look how beautiful," she whispered with reverence. "She's shedding her skin. That means she's growing into someone new." Caleb met Veronica's eyes over Lily's head. The metaphor wasn't lost on either of them. They spent 2 hours in the reptile house, Lily narrating the life story of every snake and lizard, while Veronica listened with the same focused attention she brought to quarterly earnings reports. When they finally emerged back into sunlight, Lily announced she was hungry enough to eat approximately 1 million chicken nuggets. The Zoo Cafe was crowded with weekend families, the kind of cheerful chaos that Caleb had grown used to navigating alone. But today, with Veronica beside him, it felt different. She helped Lily pick out her lunch, patiently explaining why 5 cookies probably wasn't a balanced meal, compromising on 2 cookies if Lily ate her apple slices first. They found a table in the shade, and as Lily demolished her chicken nuggets, Veronica leaned close to Caleb. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly, "about work." His stomach tightened. "Okay." "Anderson, my VP of operations. He's been pushing back against our friendship. Says it's inappropriate that I'm showing favoritism. He went to the board." Caleb felt ice slide down his spine. "What did the board say?" "They want to meet with me Monday morning. Discuss the situation." Veronica's jaw was tight, her CEO mask firmly in place even as vulnerability flickered in her eyes. "They can't force me to end a personal friendship, but they can make things difficult. Question my judgment. Use it as ammunition." "Then we stop," Caleb said immediately. "The Saturday visits. At work, we go back to being just colleagues. I'm not worth risking your company over." "Don't." Veronica's hand covered his, fierce and certain. "Don't you dare make that decision for me. Sterling Industries is my company. I built it. And if the board thinks they can dictate my personal life, they're going to learn exactly why I'm the CEO and they're not." "Veronica." "No, Caleb. Listen to me." Her voice dropped lower, intense. "For 15 years, I let that company consume everything. I sacrificed friendships, relationships, any semblance of a personal life because I thought that's what success required. And you know what I got? A penthouse full of expensive furniture and loneliness so deep I was drinking myself numb at charity galas." Lily looked up from her nuggets, sensing the shift in tone. "Miss Veronica, are you okay?" Veronica's expression softened immediately. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Just having an important conversation with your dad." "About grown-up stuff?" "Very grown-up stuff." "Okay. I'll be quiet so you can talk." Lily returned to her lunch with exaggerated focus, clearly listening to every word. Veronica smiled despite the tension, then turned back to Caleb. "I'm not giving this up. You and Lily, you've shown me what actually matters. What success looks like when it includes people who see you as human instead of a position to exploit. If the board can't handle that, then maybe I need a new board." "You can't just fire your board of directors. Watch me." There was steel in her voice now, the same strength that had built a billion-dollar empire. "I own controlling shares. I have final say. And I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you and Lily and Saturday afternoons and actually living instead of just achieving." Caleb stared at her, this woman who'd been untouchable and was now laying herself bare in a zoo cafe surrounded by screaming children and the smell of French fries. "You're serious." "Completely serious." She paused, vulnerability breaking through the steel. "Unless you don't want this. If the complications are too much, if you've changed your mind, I haven't changed my mind." Caleb cut her off, his own certainty surprising him. "I'm terrified, but I haven't changed my mind. He glanced at Lily, who was definitely listening. "You're important to us, both of us. And if you're willing to fight for this, then so am I. Even though I'm your boss? Even though you're my boss? Even though people will talk? Even though it's complicated and messy and probably insane?" He squeezed her hand. "My wife taught me something before she died. She used to say that love, real love, isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone worth fighting for, someone who makes you want to be brave." Veronica's eyes glistened. She sounds like she was an incredible person. She was. And I think, Caleb's voice caught, I think she'd like you, would approve of you being here with us. Really? Really? Emily believed in living fully, in taking chances on people who mattered. She wouldn't want me to play it safe just because it's complicated. Lily, who had apparently decided the grown-up conversation was boring, piped up. Mommy would definitely like Ms. Veronica, because Ms. Veronica knows about penguins, and she brings good soup when I'm sick, and she makes Daddy smile the way he looks in the old pictures with Mommy. The observation landed like a revelation. Caleb felt tears threatening, his daughter's simple wisdom cutting through all his careful overthinking. Out of the mouths of babes, Veronica whispered, clearly fighting her own tears. She's a wise one, Caleb agreed, his voice rough. They finished lunch in easier silence, the crisis not resolved but at least acknowledged. As they walked back through the zoo, Lily insisting they visit the giraffes one more time, Caleb felt something shifting, not just between him and Veronica, but within himself. He'd spent 3 years in survival mode, focused entirely on being enough parent for Lily, on honoring Emily's memory by staying steady and present. He'd convinced himself that was enough, that building a life beyond just him and his daughter was somehow betraying Emily's memory. But watching Veronica crouch beside Lily at the giraffe exhibit, listening to her explain giraffe social hierarchies with the same seriousness she brought to boardroom strategy, Caleb realized Emily wouldn't have wanted him frozen in grief. She would have wanted him to live, to love again, to give Lily the kind of full life that included more than just one exhausted parent doing his best. She would have wanted exactly this. That evening, after they'd said goodbye to Veronica in the parking lot, Lily demanding a promise that she'd come back next week, Caleb got a text. Thank you for today, for choosing to fight for this. I'm going into that board meeting Monday ready to defend what matters. Whatever happens, I want you to know, you and Lily have changed my life. You've reminded me what being human actually means. V. Caleb typed back with Lily asleep against his shoulder in the car. Whatever the board says, we're here. You're not alone in this fight. See, I know. That's what makes me brave enough to have it. Monday morning came with storm clouds rolling over Chicago, the kind of dark November weather that matched Caleb's anxiety. He knew Veronica's board meeting was at 9. He tried to focus on his work, but every time his phone buzzed, his heart jumped. At 10:47, his desk phone rang. Internal call. From Veronica's office. Hayes, he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. Mr. Hayes? It was Karen, Veronica's assistant. Ms. Sterling would like to see you in her office, immediately. The walk to the executive floor felt endless. Caleb's mind raced through worst-case scenarios. The board had forced her to choose. She'd been removed as CEO. She was about to tell him they couldn't see each other anymore. He knocked on her office door, his hand less steady than he wanted. Come in. Veronica sat behind her massive desk, still in the suit she'd worn to the board meeting. Her expression was unreadable, the CEO mask firmly in place. Caleb's stomach dropped. This was it, the end of whatever they'd been building. Then Veronica smiled. Not her corporate smile. The real one. The one that reached her eyes and transformed her face. Close the door, she said. He did, his heart hammering. The board meeting, he started. What did they... I quit. Caleb stared at her, certain he'd misheard. You what? I quit, resigned as CEO, effective in 60 days, which gives me time to transition my responsibilities and find a replacement. Veronica stood, moving around the desk toward him. I spent 2 hours listening to them explain how my personal life was a liability to the company, how my relationship with you showed poor judgment, how I needed to prioritize Sterling Industries over inappropriate fraternization. Veronica, and I realized something, she continued, her voice steady despite the enormity of what she was saying. I've spent 15 years building that company at the expense of everything else. I've sacrificed relationships, friendships, any chance at actual happiness, because I thought the company was all that mattered. And this morning, sitting in that boardroom with 12 people telling me I had to choose between my career and the first real connection I've had in years, I finally understood. Understood what? That none of it matters if I'm miserable. That being the CEO of a $1 billion company means nothing if I'm spending every night alone in that penthouse, drinking champagne to forget how empty everything feels. She stepped closer, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You asked me once what I wanted my life to look like, and I didn't have an answer because I'd never let myself want anything beyond the next quarter's earnings. And now, Caleb's voice was barely a whisper, now I want Saturday afternoons at the zoo. I want Lily teaching me about penguins. I want to show up for people without calculating the return on investment. Her voice broke. I want you, Caleb. I want a life with you and Lily, if you'll have me. A real life. Not one built on power and control, but on actually caring about people and being cared about in return. Caleb felt like the ground had shifted beneath him. You can't just quit. That company is your legacy. No. Veronica shook her head firmly. That company is a job. A very successful job, but still just a job. You and Lily, you're my legacy. The person I'm becoming when I'm with you. That's what I want to build. What will you do? I don't know yet. She laughed, and it sounded like freedom. Isn't that terrifying? For the first time in 15 years, I don't have a 5-year plan. I don't have quarterly objectives or market projections. I just have the choice to build something different. The board really tried to make you choose between the company and me? They gave me an ultimatum. End all personal contact with you, transfer you to a different division, and issue a formal statement about maintaining professional boundaries. Or face a vote of no confidence. Veronica's smile was sharp. So I chose option 3. Tell them exactly where they could shove their ultimatum and resign. Despite everything, Caleb laughed. You really did that. I really did. Anderson looked like he was going to have a stroke, but you know what? It felt incredible. The most honest thing I've done in years. Caleb pulled her into his arms then, no longer caring about professional boundaries or what anyone might think. She melted into him, and he felt the tension drain from her shoulders as she finally let herself be held. You're insane, he murmured into her hair. Probably. But I'm done being careful, done being untouchable. I want to actually live, Caleb. With you. If you want that too. He pulled back enough to look at her face. This woman who'd just walked away from everything she'd built for a chance at something real. I want that, he said. More than I've wanted anything since Emily died. But I need you to be sure, really sure. Because, Lily, I know. Veronica's hands came up to frame his face. I know she comes first. I know I'm asking to be part of both your lives, and that's a responsibility I don't take lightly. I'm not trying to replace her mother. I could never do that. But I want to be someone who shows up, who's there for both of you, who makes your life better instead of more complicated. You already do that, Caleb said honestly. You've been doing that since the first time you showed up at the zoo, ready to learn about penguins just because Lily wanted to teach you. So we're doing this? Actually trying? We're doing this. He kissed her then, soft and sure, a promise sealed with contact. When they broke apart, both of them were smiling through tears. I should tell you, Veronica said. I already called a real estate agent. I'm selling the penthouse. What? Why? Because it's not a home. It's a museum. I want a place where Lily can run around without worrying about breaking expensive art, where we can have family dinners without everything feeling like it belongs in a magazine spread, where it actually feels like people live there. Veronica, you don't have to. I want to, she interrupted. I want a home, a real one. Maybe not right away, maybe we take this slow like we said, but eventually, if this works, if we work, I want to build a life that includes sticky fingers on the furniture and crayon drawings on the fridge and all the beautiful mess that comes with actually living. Caleb felt his throat close with emotion. Emily used to say our apartment was too small, too cramped. She wanted a house with a yard where Lily could play. We were saving up when... He stopped, swallowed hard. I never thought I'd get to give Lily that, not on my salary. Then let's give it to her together. Veronica's voice was gentle but certain. When the time is right, when we're ready. But let's build toward that, toward the kind of life where Saturday afternoons aren't the exception. They're just what life looks like. A knock on the door interrupted them. Karen's voice came through. Miss Sterling, your 10:30 is waiting. Veronica called back without moving from Caleb's arms. Cancel it. Cancel everything for the rest of the day. Ma'am? I'm taking the afternoon off, Karen. Personal time. If anyone needs me, tell them I'll be available tomorrow. Silence from the other side of the door. Then, yes, ma'am. Enjoy your afternoon. Veronica turned back to Caleb, her smile mischievous. I've never taken a personal afternoon in 10 years. This feels rebellious. What are you going to do with all this unexpected free time? Well, it's Monday. Lily's at preschool, right? Until 3. Then I was thinking we could go somewhere. Talk. Actually figure out what this looks like going forward. No interruptions, no work emergencies, just us making plans. I'd like that, Caleb said. But first I need to tell you something. Okay. I'm falling in love with you. The words came easier than he expected, honest and true. I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, but I need you to know. This isn't just about companionship or filling a void. I'm actually falling in love with who you are. The woman who studies field guides to impress a 3-year-old, who shows up with too much soup, who quit her job rather than give up on something real. Veronica's eyes filled with tears that finally spilled over. I'm falling in love with you too, with your steadiness and your honesty, and the way you see people's humanity instead of their utility. With the father you are to Lily, with the man who offered to drive a drunk CEO home when everyone else walked away. They stood there in her office, holding each other, letting the truth of those words settle around them like a foundation. So what now? Caleb asked. Now we go live our lives, together. They left Sterling Industries hand in hand, walking out past cubicles full of employees who definitely noticed and would definitely gossip. Caleb didn't care. Let them talk. He had more important things to focus on. They spent the afternoon at a quiet cafe, making plans over coffee that actually stayed hot because they weren't interrupted every 5 minutes. Veronica would transition out of her CEO role over the next 60 days. She'd stay on the board but step back from daily operations. She was already fielding calls from companies interested in her consulting expertise. Apparently, billionaire CEOs who voluntarily resign are in high demand. Caleb would stay at Sterling Industries for now, but they'd revisit that decision once Veronica's transition was complete. No more boss-employee dynamic, just two people building a life together. They picked up Lily from preschool together, and she was so excited to see them both that she told her entire class about her 2 favorite people in the whole world coming to get her. That night, they ordered pizza and ate it on Caleb's worn couch while Lily performed an elaborate show involving Mr. Trunk and a cast of stuffed animals. Veronica sat close enough that their shoulders touched, and when Lily climbed into her lap during the finale, demanding applause, something in Caleb's chest cracked open. This was it. This was what he'd been too scared to hope for. A second chance at family, at love, at a life that included more than just survival. After Lily was in bed, he and Veronica stood in his small kitchen, washing dishes side by side in comfortable silence. I was thinking, Veronica said, handing him a plate to dry, about what you said, about Emily wanting a house with a yard. Yeah? What if we started looking? Not to buy immediately, but just to see what's out there, something with space for Lily to play. Maybe a room that could be a home office for you, a kitchen where we could actually cook together instead of ordering takeout all the time. Caleb set down the plate, turning to face her fully. You really want that? The whole domestic package? I want everything, Veronica said simply. I've spent so long denying myself anything that wasn't career-related. Now I want the things I told myself didn't matter. A home. A partner. Being part of Lily's life as she grows up. Sunday morning pancakes and school pickups and all the ordinary beautiful chaos that makes a life worth living. It won't always be beautiful, Caleb warned. Sometimes it'll be exhausting. Lily gets sick at 3 a.m. She has nightmares. She's learning to negotiate, and it's terrifying how good she is at it. There will be hard days and frustrating moments and times when you wonder why you signed up for this. I know. Veronica stepped closer, her hands finding his. But I'd rather have hard days with you and Lily than easy days alone in that penthouse. I'd rather be exhausted from living than rested from existing. Caleb kissed her then, long and slow, a promise of all the days to come, the hard ones and the easy ones and everything in between. Over the next 2 months, they built their life in increments. Veronica's transition out of Sterling Industries was smooth, despite Anderson's attempts to make it difficult. She took on consulting work that let her set her own hours, choosing projects that interested her rather than just ones that paid the most. They found a house in Oak Park, a 3-bedroom craftsman with a fenced yard and a kitchen that needed updating but had good bones. Veronica paid cash, insisting it was an investment in their future, and Caleb stopped arguing when Lily saw the yard and immediately started planning where they'd build a penguin sanctuary. Moving day was chaos. Lily helped by unpacking boxes of stuffed animals and arranging them in elaborate scenes throughout the house. Caleb assembled furniture while Veronica organized the kitchen with an efficiency that made him laugh. You could take the woman out of the CEO role, but some habits died hard. That night, they ordered pizza again, a tradition now, and sat on the floor of their new living room surrounded by boxes and scattered toys and the beautiful mess of lives combining. "I can't believe this is real," Veronica said, watching Lily chase dust motes through the sunlight streaming through their new windows. "It's real," Caleb confirmed, pulling her close. "Crazy and complicated and absolutely real. Best decision I ever made. Quitting that job, choosing this life. No regrets? Not even one." Lily ran over and wedged herself between them, creating a tangle of arms and legs and warmth. "I love our new house," she announced, "and I love that Miss Veronica lives with us now." "I love it too, sweetheart," Veronica said, pressing a kiss to Lily's curls. "Are you going to marry my daddy?" The question came with the casual bluntness only children could manage. Caleb and Veronica exchanged glances over Lily's head, surprised but not unhappy. "Would you like that?" Veronica asked carefully. "If your dad and I got married?" Lily considered this with her usual seriousness. "Will you still take me to see the penguins?" "Every Saturday." "And will you still make the good soup when I'm sick?" "Always." "Then yes, I would like that very much." Lily paused. "Can Mr. Trunk be in the wedding?" Veronica laughed, genuine and joyful. "Mr. Trunk can absolutely be in the wedding. He can be the ring bearer." "What's a ring bearer?" "Someone very important who carries the rings." "Perfect. Mr. Trunk is very important." Caleb felt tears threatening again. The happy kind. The kind that came from watching everything you'd thought you'd lost come back in a different form. 6 months later, on a perfect Saturday afternoon in May, they got married in the Penguin Pavilion at Lincoln Park Zoo. Lily wore a flower crown and carried Mr. Trunk, who did indeed serve as ring bearer. The ceremony was small, just Mrs. Chen, a few close friends, and Karen, who'd become Veronica's friend once they weren't boss and assistant. As they exchanged vows with penguins waddling behind them and Lily beaming from the front row, Caleb thought about the night that had started everything. The crimson dress, the champagne, the moment he'd chosen to help instead of walking away. He'd thought he was just giving someone a ride home. He hadn't known he was starting a journey toward this. A new family, a new chance, a life built on the simple radical act of showing up for each other. When the officiant pronounced them married, Lily cheered loudly enough to startle the penguins. Veronica laughed and kissed Caleb while their daughter danced with Mr. Trunk, celebrating love in all its chaotic, beautiful forms. That evening, they went back to their house in Oak Park. All 3 of them now, officially a family. Lily fell asleep between them on the couch, exhausted from the excitement. Caleb and Veronica stayed awake a little longer, watching their daughter sleep, marveling at the life they'd built. "Thank you," Veronica whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me that night, for offering to help when you had every reason to walk away, for teaching me what actually matters. Thank you for being brave enough to let yourself be seen, for choosing this over everything else, for loving us." "Easiest choice I ever made," Veronica said, echoing her words from moving day. Outside their window, Chicago glittered in the darkness, the same city where they'd met, where Caleb had lost everything and somehow found it again, where Veronica had built an empire and then walked away from it to build something better. In the morning, there would be breakfast to make and a yard that needed mowing and all the ordinary tasks that made up a life. There would be challenges and hard days and moments when they'd have to choose each other all over again. But tonight, they had this. 3 people curled together on a couch that had seen better days, in a house filled with love instead of expensive furniture, building the kind of family that showed up for each other without conditions. It was messy, It was complicated. It was absolutely perfect. And it all started with a glass of water, a midnight drive, and one man who chose kindness when everyone else chose to look away.